Hello, everyone. This evening, I have to speak with you. This is YouTube Masterclass, but we're on break here. It's not exactly summer break because summer is going to have classes. And as I have reported before, this is Dr. Aaron Sheedy, and I'm teaching a course on special effects and how they work in cinema and how they create a special effect based on the movie idea that they're working on and how they're going to create the process of the imagery of special effects for the shot. It's already in the script. Usually the special effects are written into the script, and we'll get a lot more into that and how they use plot points on a chart to kind of build pictures, and then how you take a picture of the picture that you're growing. And by growing, I mean generating through different generations of movement. Like, for instance, if you were going to take a giant sandworm from a movie, dude, they've shown us in Universal Studios and other places that you could take a camera and put it real close up to a model, and then kind of decorate with a sandstorm blowing by and have this like ship going through, and it can look. If you do it just right and kind of delete out the way that you're holding it up, then it can look even as good as like the movie Spaceballs, where there's an RV flying through space. But these are all exciting things, these special effects. And I had to come back and look at the final from semester two. It looks like a lot of people did really well in semester one on the final. There's been like 7 or 8 that got A's, and nobody got anything lower than that, really. So it's a really good final. The second one, I've only known 4 people to go through the entire class. The second one, it looks like there might be only 3 that have completed all the classes, but 4, it looks like, made it through the whole master class. That I've graded 3 of their finals and they got A's was good, but I had to kind of clarify a few things about pure cinema and cinema pur. It almost means the same thing because in the French cinema pur, that almost means pure cinema. And then the other type of pure cinema is like pure cinema. So let me remind you, if you're working on this final, and this can kind of be something you can verbatimly address later if you look at this particular master class, and that is that the masterclass question of cinema pur switches around to pure cinema, but it's not in quotes. So in that case, it's purifying the image, that is, drawing lines and hexes or whatever through the image until it condenses down to one thing and leaves like a blank screen. This is like French Impressionism, where you're taking blocky chunks, like in Rhythmus 21. You're taking these blocky chunks of movement and moving them all over the place. There's like this Charlie Chaplin in blocks that comes down on Rhythmus 21, by Walter Ruttman. And these are experimental animation, impressionistic, not really poetic realism, but impressionistic, where they light up the colors and all the colors kind of explode, but it's black and white, but they're exploding onto the screen in these kind of riveting, like almost computer monitor patterns. But they're patterns of a movie long before computer monitors, but they're using kind of similar processes to take these pictures of this animation. Another example of cinema pur is Entr'acte by René Clair, and this is an interaction in the intermission of the film, between the film that's supposed to play. What film? I don't remember what Entr'acte was actually in the middle of. That'd be a good bonus question. Anybody can look that up? I could probably look it up. But what Interact movie was that really the Entr'acte for? Because there's got to be something. It wasn't Last Year at Marienbad, because that was years later. So what was Entr'acte really the Entr'acte for? That's a good question. If it was, actually, I think the answer to that is pretty simple. I think René Clair opened it in theaters just like he had it there and called it Entr'acte, and I don't think really it was between 2 movies. But that'd be cool if there was like something like, at Atlanta, all of a sudden it goes out to those places or whatever, other clips of other movies. I'm kind of getting stalled here, but I want to talk more about Star Wars: The Complete Saga. And a couple of the Star Wars movies I've got over here are new ones like Rogue One. I don't want to have Han Solo. I got The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. I don't know how far we're going to get on the Star Wars movement and marathon today or tonight, but
I'm going to give you a little shot at an extra day of semester 2 with this one. And we'll start semester 3 still May 3rd, but I was too tempted to come to class tonight and just be like, Harvard, USC, CALARTS, we're on for just another day before we go curbing out into the darkness of the night, and then we won't be back till May 3rd. Now, Star Wars, the complete saga. Now, we're not going to go in this in date order. We're going to go in this episode order. So we're starting with The Phantom Menace. Now, everybody knows the first one that came out was episode 4, and that was Star Wars and New Hope. Now, it was originally just called Star Wars, and they were launching it to think they could launch the other ones, and that they did such a good job on the business aspects of it that they lined it up so they could have all the special effects they wanted and all the locations they wanted, wherever they wanted to go, with whatever people they wanted, because they scheduled it and they put it to a very commercial time budget. And the budget for the first one was actually clear enough that they could do whatever they wanted and still get away with a pretty good deal from Fox, that they made so much blockbuster, more than any other films ever. The Harry Potter films, I don't know if Harry Potter made more than Star Wars. It seems like Star Wars, now with these new ones, may have rivaled back at the Harry Potter business, but I don't know what's the biggest franchise. I know the Avatar franchise is huge, and it's only got 2 movies, but they're 4 hours long, so you got to understand they're like casing for like almost 8 movies, or almost 4 movies in 2, you know. These are really impressive, and that these are special effects movies. We can talk a little bit about the precepts of special effects in these movies, because actually one thing is they're usually written in, or somehow it's like if a phaser went off in a Star Trek episode, usually the script would say, well, the phaser goes off and shoots at someone. And in Star Wars, it'd be like he swings his lightsaber, and it'd be like go to ballet format on the other page, you know, and then they'd have the notes about how they're supposed to sword fight across this thing, and it's all like samurai. Now, we talked a little bit 2 semesters ago how the word Jedi is Japanese for samurai. And Jedi, Gedai, is Jedi, which is Japanese for samurai. And samurai is the English word for Jedi. There you go. And that's what I was trying to say. So, now that there's samurai Jedi is because all the stories in these movies are like the samurai stories. Let me just give you one. Hidden Fortress by Akira Kurosawa. We screened that at USC. And we had to notice all the ways that it was like A New Hope. And the robots at the beginning of New Hope are just like the 2 Japanese guys that meet at the road, and they're all arguing, and they're like, well, I'm going this way, and the other guy goes that way. And they keep mixing up in these big epic scenes, and it's Hidden Fortress, which is like this moving ship, you know, that the princess is on. And it's like approach the inmost cave, the dark tower. And I'm telling you, I'm writing a sci-fi book right now, you know, Starship Atlantis, and it's like Stargate Atlantis. And I have to give a little bit of away because it's not just Star Wars, but they have these movies that are adaptable to the viewing capacity of watching these like moral tales of mythologies. And the mythologies are not just moral tales, they're like tall tales that are folklore, and that creates the whole language. That Star Wars creates the language of religion more than anything else, is because the Force is a religion. And actually, whether or not George Lucas believes in it or not, which he may not, being a skeptic, but there are a lot of people that do actually believe the Force exists, and I've actually seen people use it. And I mean, whether or not that means it's real or not, I don't know, because I'm a skeptic. I saw someone use the Force. Does that mean that the Force exists? Or that what I perceived was just someone using the Force, and maybe they were saying it, but maybe there is no Force? I mean, it's just like the question on God itself. That's why it creates a religion. But I want to see a show of hands of anyone that doesn't believe in the Force. No hands? Everybody believes in the Force. I mean, it sounds so nerdy to say I believe in the Force, but I don't know of anyone since Star Wars Episode 4 came out that haven't believed in the Force. Now you're going to these approach to the inmost cave, and you got Hidden Fortress, and you got the main guys on the line, and the princess is there, and she's taken captured. But Hidden Fortress is a real paradigmatic movie that's similar to Star Wars A New Hope. that we start with Phantom Menace, okay? And Phantom Menace is an interesting movie because I'm not really going to go down the lane of Jar Jar Binks. I know what happened there. It was just this big, funny, bunny cartoon character that I didn't know if I appreciated him tripping over bombs and knocking ships out. Later, when I watched it, I thought, well, the irony abounds because later we see C-3PO in an arena that where he gets his head knocked off and it gets put on another robot and he's running around and he's all, die, you Jedi dogs. Oh, what am I saying? You know, it's like, so if C-3PO was like knocked around a few times, then I guess they can all get knocked around in an arena, you know, especially him. So that Jar Jar is tripping over the things is like C-3PO with this robot body, you know. It's just a comic relief. Kids like comic relief. These are kids movies, you know. American Graffiti by George Lucas isn't exactly a kids movie, but it's a young adult movie, and then it's about going to college, still a high school age, and so we're thinking, well, if you're going to college and this is a high school age, and this is the perfect film to see for you because American Graffiti is coming out. And by the way, let's clear something up. A lot of people have good soundtracks in their movies, but American Graffiti has one of the best soundtracks, if not the best soundtrack to a film ever. And I'm not just saying that because it's doo-wop songs, because I like doo-wop songs. But what I am saying is that there's a couple other movies that have better film scores, maybe. Yeah, for sure. Like Godfather has a better film score. Gone with the Wind has a better film score. But the soundtrack with all the songs that play, I've heard 3 or 4 that were real good, and I'm not talking about composed ones like 9 Inch Nails' Social Network. I'm talking about some that really work, and even the Pink Floyd The Wall would probably be the best one, although, again, that music was already out. Then they made the film. It wasn't like they put the music into the film like a soundtrack. So in that case, do we go to Nashville instead of American Graffiti? Well, again, they're using natural sound on these guys who are writing their own music, so it's a totally different process than putting the music in yourself. So it looks like American Graffiti is pulling ahead in that one, in that horse race, because it looks like American Graffiti might end up with the best soundtrack. That 110th Street song on the movie Coffee is pretty good, but and that's a pretty good soundtrack too, the movie Coffee, so we got to keep that in consideration too. But American Graffiti has all the hits and all the stuff that's still, there's music in that that's obscure. And the reason I bring that up is because George Lucas did all these films, and that recently I was able to get a hold of like the LucasArts, and I was talking to LucasArts, and I was like, well, what do they need to reboot the label, you know, because I was trying to use a label for one of my shows called Dungeon Master, and freaking all I heard that they needed a lot of money to raise the label. And I was like, well, I'll see who it has it, you know. And then I've heard like people that'll just straight up offer, oh, gee, if they want to renew Lucas games, we'll go straight in there and redo it. And even this kind of gives like George Lucas even more impetus to keep going because he's got so many companies, and then he's actually changing LucasArts to something else. But I'm riding out on it because they had already suggested in my suggestion box that I work with that logo, at least in a way to valueize the work and also put into context those color correction parameters, and those are kind of YouTube rules that eventually on these series we'll get to the YouTube rules and how to build a YouTube channel and where to go to get the things to build on a YouTube channel. Mine's a YouTube creator channel, and there's a YouTube masterclass channel. Well, we forget ourselves, we're in masterclass. Let's hit up Phantom Menace. So there's Darth Maul is this like demon guy who's like the devil, and he's the meanest for 2 lightsaber swinging this guy. That this guy Anakin Skywalker is a little kid on Tatooine is totally like the beginning of the whole series, and his mom gives a virgin birth to her son. Then he meets Queen Amidala. So it goes from queen to senator to princess, and sometimes back to senator. No. Queen, senator, princess in 1, 2, and 3. So she started out as the queen, then she became the senator, then she became the princess. That must be a direct descendant order on her planet. And that she's ends up being the mom of Luke and Leia is because that's young Darth Vader who gives birth to Luke and Leia with his wife. And in episode 4, it kind of mimics episode 1, where they see everything on the farm, and the farm is still there so much earlier in the era. The farm is even still there when they bring young Luke there. And then all the way to episode 4, he's growing up on the farm, and this is like a total Searchers thing, because now they're flushed away from home, and when they get back home, the whole place is crushed, just like in the Searchers, where they're flushed away from home, and when they get back home, the whole place is crushed. That was in episode 4. And then they find out it's the Sand People. They follow the Dozer. They get to they actually get a tractor beam into the Death Star pretty early on, and then they keep going back to the Death Star to put other things in it, and finally Obi-Wan gets the whack down, but he says that famous line, "Strike me down and I'll become more powerful than ever." And so now that Darth Vader strikes down Obi-Wan in episode 4, and Obi-Wan was played by Ewan McGregor in 1, 2, and 3, and that Ewan McGregor is actually going to be the sorcerer's apprentice of this young Jedi. And the Jedi use magic, whether it's black magic or white magic, they don't really gauge, but they do have evil and good, and things beyond evil and good. And mostly the dark side is trickery, because in selfishness, George Lucas states it is selfishness, the dark side, that you want everything for yourself and you don't want to give to anyone. So that's why you would grab everything and bring it all in and be materialistic and roll in your big movie collection, and just, no, okay. So the materialism we can already see is like this ascetic version of how to be spiritual with your robes, and we're all being spiritual because we use the Force and we can do things that we can't see. And like I said, the Force may be real, and most of us think it is deep down seriously real just because we've seen it in Star Wars. But even then, if someone said something about how did you do that, and then they said using the Force, I think maybe we'd believe them once in a while, because yeah, there's some ways to do that. There are actually Jedi trainers that are like these kind of big palace Chinese trainer guys that are like ninjas and warriors and samurai, and that they're trained to the level of the samurai. And the samurai are given a sacred seal too by the appeal of the High Council in Japan. The appeal of the High Council in Japan will cast a blessing on you and make you a samurai as you're being inducted with your armor and your sword and standing there before the throne and saying, "This is me, I'm protecting this throne, and I'll go within my life to save this throne." And so the samurai bows before the throne and then goes on and fights for the kingdom, or the daimyo, or the faction, or the small city-state townships in Japan that were run by feudal lords, and it was all a caste system that they were born into. And this doesn't totally reflect only Japan, because actually it's interesting, because in episode 1, one of the things that's going on is we're seeing the early introduction of the Trade Federation. And if the Trade Federation has these guys that kind of look and sound Japanese but are cartoons, then we're already kind of worried that we're transgressing into some kind of racial code. But why it's not a racial code in Star Wars is because they're all speaking other languages, and this is where we solve that problem. Now, I was wondering, if the robot doesn't speak French, C-3PO speaks every language, but why doesn't he speak French, German, and Dutch? Well, because the planet we're getting it on shows it in French, German, or Dutch. But the aliens are the only ones that speak the other language, because we're getting the language that the humans would speak to us in our country. But I've seen it in Belgium, and they actually, while having the soundtrack in English, they had the subtitles in Dutch, so they're getting the Dutch words transferred to them. Why the film doesn't have a breach of different languages? Well, I believe, my theory is, because that way the aliens can. Because even though the aliens get a little quote-unquote stereotypical or whatever of a culture, they don't really, because they're aliens and they're speaking in languages that George Lucas made up the language. So then it's like he's making up languages. Would that blend with different languages on Earth? Or they're not on Earth, they're on Tatooine. It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That's my theory. I think it's because he didn't want to display anything that would offend anybody if they were all speaking in French or that it was all read in French, then it would make sense that the aliens didn't have to speak in German. You know, I think that'd be a real flaw if it had the aliens speaking another foreign language as their language. It'd be kind of funny, and maybe that, but it seems like that'd be pushing it, and maybe that's why they carded it and said it's all in one language here, except the aliens, which all have different languages that are real worked out languages in the book. That's why I'm sure that detail was worked over. I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's like, well, if we put other languages in it, then what are we doing, Shakespeare here, Which we are doing Shakespeare. This is Shakespeare for kids, and we like making movies for kids, and that's why I brought up American Graffiti, because it's from my heart, from kids. THX is a different kind of a movie because he's trapped in this control studio, and he's messing with these different levers, and he's pushing these different buttons, and finally things are blowing up, and he's kind of getting out of his seat, and he's been in a control room like his whole day, and I've worked in TV control rooms for a lot of hours in a row, like 60 hours in a row one time, and it's like, you're in the way it looks reminds me so much of that THX movie where they're like in a studio, and actually when the Death Star gets nuked in the first one, it's about to destroy a planet, and they turn these switches, and it looks like a TV control room that's armed in the Death Star that's about to blow everything up in episode 4 and some other ones. Now, the first one concludes with Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson, who we only see in the first one. And he's training Anakin Skywalker, but has completed his training. And then if Anakin Skywalker was a little kid in part 1, he had to race the pod race to get off the planet. Now, one thing about this is Liam Neeson comes in with a very interesting point about big fish eating little fish when they're going down to Naboo and meeting with Jar Jar. But later in the film, when they go to Tatooine, they get stuck, they're out of gas, Sith Maul almost kills everybody. And Sith Maul's dangerous, he's got this really fast speeder. And so they decide to do a bet, and then they're saying, well, there's always bigger fish, gambling's wrong, but let's do gambling anyway. There's no real plot. I like that about that movie. That just, like, they don't like gambling, they don't think gambling's a good idea, and they're like, by the way, we should gamble our way out of this. And they're like, okay. It's like, gambling sucks, gambling rules, okay. And I like that about the movie. Like, it kind of was that in episode 8, The Last Jedi, where they went back to that planet of all gambling, and I know there's a planet of all gambling in the L. Ron Hubbard series too, and that was a good reference to that. But I'm saying the planet of all gambling, So now they're at the planet of all gambling, so they gamble on the pod race of all things, which puts the kid in danger. Everybody's getting blown up on their pods, and I'm over the kids in danger thing. I used to be mad at Harry Potter when I was young for putting him in so much danger. Man, if you were really a kid in a witchcraft class, you'd have to overcome danger. That's one of the things you have to overcome is danger. So I don't really mind that the kid in the first one gets put in these positions that are kind of dangerous. But that he's so full of midichlorians, which is what like makes a Jedi flow and create, and they find him full of midichlorians, means that he is capable of winning a pod race. They're finding out he is capable of flying a spaceship to the shield and blowing it up. And I didn't mind that part. I thought, well, if he's going to blow it up, that's fine. But I know all the other fighter pilots are being chased around, but this is a cool movie because it gives a kid a chance to fly a ship on accident, and then he blows the computer, shows that there's something about his midichlorians that are rescuing us all already, and it already shows what a powerful warrior he was as a kid, and it already shows that he's going to grow up to be trained a Jedi at the end, which is what they discuss. Now, Attack of the Clones is totally different, and I got to get into Attack of the Clones mode. Hang on. Okay, I'm ready. No, Attack of the Clones mode means that this is a totally different kind of Star Wars, because after number 1 kind of came out, it was great, and it had this languorous David Lean-like technologies with the camera in the desert, and Tatooine's looking better than ever, and everything looks silky smooth with these digital cameras, and Yoda's looking cool, and, Samuel L. Jackson's Mace Windu, and he's got the badass lightsaber and stuff, and everything's working out for the Star Wars crew. And, in the second one, you get this idea that like everything's bigger, crazier, wilder, bigger, longer, uncut, but it's even crazier than that because this one it goes from mildly fast in the first one to bonkers crazy fast, and then the third one's ludicrous speed. And I'm telling you why, because the second one, they're already jumping out of a cab in the very beginning to stop this half lizard lady from why she tried to poison. Now, the Senator Amidala is in the second one. And it's still Queen Amidala, who had a double in the first one, I want you to know. She had a body double, and she kept switching with her body double in and out of the adventures. And there's some things where they have to fight their way back to Naboo freedom, and the Gungans come with the Naboos, and they all decide to form a creative society and fight together. And if they didn't fight together, then Jar Jar wouldn't have tripped over all the bombs and blown everybody out now. But what I'm getting at is the action-packed full-pacedness of Part 3, where they start out and they're on that giant ship battle, and there's all these ships in the sky blowing each other away, and Obi-Wan and Anakin, who's played by Hayden Christensen in number 2, and he's already coming out as this like kid, but he's older now. He's like, I can't wait to see what the Senator looks like. Do you think she even remembers me? I mean, it's so perfect. The lyrics are like, one of the things I like about 1, 2, and 3 better than 4, 5, and 6 is the 1, 2, and 3 were all written and directed by George Lucas, and he's only made like 10 films that were really considered the ones he made. And I'm talking about like Howard the Duck and Radioland Murders 2 and Willow, and there's other ones that he's produced, young Indiana Jones and all that. But when he did episode 2, Attack of the Clones, it's like we're in this movie and we're in over our head and everything's going fast and crazy and everything's blowing it up. And we look at the movies that came out originally. George Lucas didn't direct all 3. It was George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and Richard Marquand who did Return of the Jedi, and Irvin Kershner who did Empire Strikes Back. But George Lucas was pretty much the overseer of Empire and Return of the Jedi, that he directed and wrote and produced and did a lot of basically everything for 1, 2, and 3. Means that's really his universe, his rules, his everything that he wanted to do, and that's why I'm honoring it as the best part. 2 is better than 1. 1 is great. I like watching 1 a lot, especially the pod race. You can watch that scene so many times and really catch different nuances about it traveling around the track and where it's going, and the sound design to these movies like Ben Burt and stuff. It's really kicky. I mean, it's explosions, it's operatic themography, music. It's like cinematic, sparkling, crisp air, and everything about the sound is like perfection. And this Attack of the Clones is interesting because George Lucas had just built his digital camera, and I remember that year when he was sending out his memo, and it was right after episode 1 came out. Well, it was a little after episode 1 came out. It was not all the way until 2001. And in 2001, I remember getting this like dossier from Herb Farmer, who used to teach me at the archive below the Norris at University of Southern California. And Herb let me like see some of the things like the Star Wars collection or whatever. But that Star Wars Episode 2, had this camera come out and this paper came out in Herb's office, and it said, he's like, oh, look at this. And we're looking at it, and it's like, well, actually what it's saying is that George Lucas has these new cameras. And he gave one to Ron Howard, one to Oliver Stone, and he gave one to Robert Zemeckis. You know, they all took his cameras and are using them. He had like this, secret infantry meeting with his favorite filmmakers or whoever wanted to come and get a new camera. And he had built the camera from the ground up. Now, for instance, I'm a very talented individual. I know sometimes I get trailed off, and I've had adventures that, like, I can always tell a story, and it's a wild story of, like, how I was here and all this shit started bursting out everywhere, and, aliens were flying around and stuff. And with me, it's like, you're going to get a story where, like, the alien turns into a ghost, and now it's ghost alien. I mean, it usually goes with ghost alien. And I've been followed around by so many ghost aliens that wouldn't even begin to worry you. But what I'm getting at is, episode 2, he built this camera, and I can't build a camera. I can do a lot of things with philosophy. I can change your mind. Listen to what I can do with philosophy. Right, here we go. Theory of relativity. So now we're in the concept of language. So is it true that we each perceive words just a minutely bit differently than everyone else? So does that mean the word we use coming out that says a word, so let's use the word word, does that mean that my version of the word word means the same thing to me as the version of the word word means to you? Well, you might have a version of the word word that's similar to mine, and that's where we kind of meet in this like precise parallel, where like our two words are similar. But why would they have to be similar if they were the exact same word? Wouldn't they be the same thing? Doesn't that mean there's a minute difference in our perception? That means everybody perceives every word they say different in the way other people perceive their words. So I'm just saying, I can do that philosophy all day. We can go through it, man. We can double check our logic. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to do film criticism now. Film criticism is this class I'm going to teach in next year too. After summer school, I'm going to go right into film criticism. And film criticism is where you're writing about film, or talking about film. Basically, it's writing about film. But what I'm doing here isn't just talking, it's writing. Because one of the reasons I'm having trouble this evening is because I had this late idea to get right into Star Wars and see how far we could get and go crushing into it. And we're doing pretty good. We're at episode 2, but we're doing pretty good. And the reason I get sidetracked on these venues is because, wow, MASTERCLASS was 6 weeks ago, but it really wasn't. It was more like 3 or 4, but it seems like it's been too long for me not to address the class and tell them I'm here and tell them we're doing this. And so we get really convenient, but the whole point of the story is as masterful as I can get as a PhD student and everything else, I'm nowhere on the level of being able to be a Kubrick or be a Lucas mover and shaker pioneer and build the camera that they're going to use for the movie. And then in Lucas' case, sell a bunch of them out. They built the camera for Barry Lyndon. Kubrick built the camera for Barry Lyndon's Candlelight. And George Lucas built the most industrial, perfect digital camera. He built it. And that's why episode 2 is the best one, because it was just built for that movie, and they were just figuring it out, and it has all the best renditions of every special effect you'd ever need. That there's painting in episode 2. That one advantage of shooting on all digital is then you can take the digital image all the way up to the digital container and change the special effects digitally very easier, because to paint from digital to digital is virtually easy. You just drop the picture onto the virtual. Drop the virtual onto the picture, and then there it is, part of the picture. So it's easier to transfer. If you have to transfer your film to digital, edit it, and then transfer it back to film, something like Apocalypse Now on a computer in 1979, and they always used computers in filmmaking up from around the time of Apocalypse Now. They knew they'd have to use a computer turntable kind of fighter, and it was this telecine that had these digital out readings and stuff. But they use a computer for Apocalypse Now, so now we're thinking, well, now they're using, but then they were putting digital printers onto the film stock, so each scene, with a lightsaber, would have the digital printer add where the light is going in the motion, just exactly at the time the picture is being developed for the second time. Re-exposures, we're using sometimes with the film stock. But then we're saying with episode 2, which came before the ones that were shot on film, 3, 4, which was only 4, 5, and 6, and then the rest, 3 was digital. It looks beautiful. The other ones are definitely digital, like J.J. Abrams with 7 and 9. I mean, those are let's use digital for everything and then nothing at all. Let's not use digital and then use it all. And then, it's such a blend of how they do it. Most shots are set up to look perfect these days, and I don't mind that, because they get the shot. The shot is moving around digitally. The person is walking in kind of a pace that's being read off to them digitally. They're kind of getting their cues on their lines digitally. And the next thing you know, they're recording this all with a color timer digitally. And they're recording this all through camera digitally. And
So then later when you take the image and have to change what's in the special effect, you take the image and you take it right off a computer and you go digital to digital. That way you won't have to fade between the mediums. Now we're back in episode 2. We got out of Gambletown. We got back to episode 2. So now they're jumping out of cars. They're catching a chick. They're in the casino. You do not want any death sticks. You do not want any death sticks. You know, I could kind of use a death stick, but we got class for right now. Come on. We can have a cigarette later, you know. So, what I'm getting at here is why I love 2 the most too is it's called Attack of the Clones. It's the Clone Wars. And in part 4, there's this part where Obi-Wan is soliloquying after he's first met by Luke Skywalker out in the desert of Tatooine. And he says, your father, Anakin, was killed. You know, and he goes on about how in the early days of the Clone Wars, you know, that he even says that gives me the shrugs for remembering that as a kid, that they were going to go back to the Clone War someday. I already knew that. I had a feeling they were going back to the Clone War. And everybody's going, well, the first one's Phantom Menace. So why is it called Phantom Menace? Is that referring to the Phantom, the Sith Maul? Or the Emperor Palpatine's hiding still in even episode 2? I don't know. And then in episode 2, we get to the part where they're talking with the Trade Federation has been pretty much blown to schmizzits in part 3. Like the Trade Federation collapses and is blown down. Also, when they're killing the Jedi, they're killing the Trade Federation. Like there's 2 different mafias they've got to get off their back. And this is all when they get the clones to operate Order 66, which is the one that gets the clones to turn on all the Jedi and kill them all, which actually works as a plan and was never foreseen by any of the prophecies of the dark side. That Mace Windu gets his arm cut off and thrown off a ledge when Anakin was going to kill him before killing the Emperor, but then the Emperor turns out to be the Sith Lord. That's part 3. Getting back to part 2, we have all the semblance with the camera work and everything, and now we're going after what the cloners are. So there's this guy in a restaurant. He's this big Guado-looking guy, and he's got like big arms and everything, and he's this alien, and he sits down with Obi-Wan, and he says, I know who that be. Cloners, they is. And it kind of sounded like this professor's voice I knew once. This guy who like talked like that. He was Dallas Willard. He kind of talked like that creature sloth thing. Came in there and they're kind of talking, and he finds out that he's got to go find Geonosis, and all these the cloners are on an island nearby, and so he goes to the library. The file's missing. He finds where the planet is just by trajectorizing. He gets there. He takes the clone tour. It's like the Jurassic Park tour, but this time it's the clone tour. In this room, we show all the clones eating their Wheaties, and they're all growing up to be very strong. And they're eating their Wheaties and they're shadowboxing at the same time. No, but there's all these clones being built, and they're all out of the same guy, and it's all Jango Fett that's being cloned. And Boba Fett's his son, and that's weird, because how could he be his mini-me if all the other guys were only guys and they were him cloned? So they made a mini-me. So these guys were really, really rare cloners, man. That they can get this happen. That they can clone a Boba Fett out of a Jango Fett. This time it's the only kid there. I like that idea because that means these guys are whacked out and need blown up. But that they never really get blown up even in episode 9, I'm not sure. But that I do know that Obi-Wan escapes barely. And he's fighting a battle with Jango Fett, the main one. The regular Jango Fett, the first one. And then they're shooting bombs at each other and they get out of there. But what happens is that Luke Anakin and the princess are falling in love. Also, Anakin's got to go kill a bunch of sand people, just so that later the Emperor can go, when you killed the Sand people. Yeah, you have to have that line in the movie because he's like totally guiltyizing the fact that he killed the sand people, and you're like, dang, man. Yeah, I guess I did do that. That was pretty cool. They were going to kill them all. That wouldn't even be bad force. That's what I'd say, bro. I'd give him a smart-ass reaction like, Harrison Ford does pretty good with the smart reactions. In 4, 5, and 6, though, I like his smart reactions because he's always got the one that's like, well, we're going to get our asses kicked, but let's go for it. Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's too good. That he's the space cowboy. He's the space cowboy, Harrison Ford. In the 4, 5, and 6, and in 7, and 9. He's a space cowboy in those movies, man. And really, it's a dimension of the film that is like a Western, and that is one of the reasons they did that searcher's metaphor, where they called him off the ranch, blew the place up, and then they went back to the ranch finding it all blown up. It's like, if only I'd have thought of that. And then the last thing that happens in episode 2 is they go through this room. They go into this. They're in. First of all, they get transferred to this Coliseum on Geonosis, which is like a planet far away. It's the farthest planet from the center of the Earth, or the center of the universe. So they're on this planet, and now we have Count Dooku's already trapped. Obi-Wan's about to get trapped. He's still trying to get out of there. And then Anakin and the Queen Amidala, or Senator Amidala, are tied up, and they're about to be all be crucified with Obi-Wan. And that they're going through this kind of passageway in time, and it's the best shot of any of the Star Wars movies. They're going through this passageway of time, coming closer and closer, kissing and realizing that they're all going to like be in this battle, and they love each other. I love you so much, but we're going to die, so I just want you to know I tried to love you with all my heart, Senator Amidala. No, that's not what he says, but like they're totally, intensely like getting into each other, and then they're going over to be slam dunked into the crucifixion pit, and they're actually, for instance, the Belgium version of the film, or the Amsterdam version of the film I saw, they were on crosses. And there were other differences and other nuances that would make any Star Wars fan angry enough to think, well, then I want to see all the different country versions. Well, there's 66 countries, so there's at least 66 versions of almost every movie. And we've discussed that in Masterclass, how there's really an American release only is all we get, but the American release, there's like 15 different ones of them, and at different times, with different means, they're all going to be a different cut. I'm sorry, but I've never seen anybody go with the same cut and the same rebuild of a movie. Like, they just don't. And it looks like everything's the same, but there's always some kind of light switched around, or effects added to the print itself that make it what it is. So, we're getting back to episode 2, so now we're fighting so now all the Jedi have come. Mace Windu brought all the Jedi, and Yoda's there. So now they're fighting everybody, everybody's fighting everybody. Most of the Jedi are winning, they're fighting like tons of evil dudes. And then the clones show up, when they're starting to get outnumbered. When the clones show up, they're fighting for Yoda, and so they jump out and save everybody, and kill everybody that's on the other team, and Trade Federation's getting hosed. And then Dooku has it out with Obi-Wan, Anakin, and then finally Yoda, and Yoda gets to swing a saber for the first time in episode 2. And that Yoda swings a saber is cool, because actually in episode 3, Yoda goes through a whole, let's throw all the chairs of the Senate at the Emperor, and he'll throw chairs of the Senate at us, and they'll try to electrocute each other, and Yoda kicks his ass. If you ask me who wins that fight, Yoda wins that fight, bro. Yoda leaves the Emperor in smackdown clothing on the floor, and should have burned his body on the same token. Yoda should have toked him up, bro, because he rolled him out. Like, the thing is he was fighting him, and they're throwing those chairs at each other, and Yoda's getting knocked down and getting up again, bro, because he's getting back up, and he eventually knocks him to pieces, but Yoda's kind of shaken from the whole thing too, and the Emperor escapes again, and it's not good that Yoda. So I still think Yoda won that fight, dude. I don't think if you look at it, if you were taking a boxing match on a Jedi form with a lightsaber, Yoda won that match. I think that it's really interesting that at the end of that movie, you see the Jedi conquest of being immaterial, being unattached, being with no romantic interest. And that if you were with a romantic interest, then you would be kind of betraying the Jedi Order. That Anakin's still rising on the Jedi Order, and he's not given his final tasks yet, makes him just run and marry Senator Palpatine. Yeah, he married Senator Palpatine. It's a whole different movie. that he married Senator Amidala, and that it's a secret marriage, and that C-3PO's at it. But C-3PO keeps getting his memory swiped like after everything. Like, we know C-3PO's losing his memory because C-3PO and R2-D2 are definitely in all 9 of them. You know, we know they're the only ones that are really in all 9 of them that are the same characters. Everybody else kind of mixes up in different ones, but C3 and R2-D2 and C-3PO, only characters in all of them. Does anybody believe that? Only characters in all of them, yeah. So their adventures are good, and R2 kind of remembers stuff, but his chip's been kind of buzzed with too, and he doesn't really talk about secrets, and nobody talks about secrets, and R2 definitely doesn't. So if R2-D2 and C-3PO are in an escape pod at the beginning and do the whole hidden fortress thing through the desert and get out of there, like the Dan Ruku actor guys from Hidden Fortress, then I think we've got an idea that C-3PO is getting knocked around, blown up in Empire Strikes Back. We'll get to that. And then C-3PO's head gets knocked off in episode 2, and they're in the pit. I was just talking about that. We're like, "Die, Jedi dog." That's in episode 2. And then in episode 3, there's the ship battle. There's everything that goes on with Anakin and the Emperor watching that opera. And by the way, that was the best special effect of the whole movie. That giant water thing that's floating and creating weird sound. It's not even creating like a dulcimer would sound. It's creating like this giant golden blob above. It's clear though, like water, and it's floating above, and it's like this opera that they're perceiving, this very violent feeling of music, this very pure feeling of music, and these giant like bubble ships through this arena, and they're talking about Darth Plagueis the Wise, and about how he rose and killed his master in his sleep before he could get to see meaning of life. He too rose on by his student and killed him and took his power, and they were supposed to somehow learn how to save lives from that. But what's weird about that is if episode 4 shows ghosts of Obi-Wan, or you hear his voice, "Use the Force, Luke," or then you get the ghost in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi where Obi-Wan comes back as a ghost, and I thought, well, I haven't seen the dark side in any of the movies come back as a ghost. So how could the dark side have the power of resurrection when Obi-Wan's like, "Kill me now and I'll take you even stronger"? Food for thought. Food for thought. And the answer to that question is because Obi-Wan found out the secrets of resurrection after part 3 when Liam Neeson's character, Qui-Gon Jinn, had talked to them from the afterlife, when Yoda had heard that in episode 3 when they were just delivered the babies, and Natalie Portman is the one that plays Senator Amidala. And she's so beautiful in the film that it's hard. It's like Star Wars to me seems like the first 3 are like Natalie Portman and everybody else. No, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, and everybody else. I'm not saying that these aren't legendary actors and that even, even Warwick Davis is in these movies, and these are great movies. I mean, they got the whole Star Wars legend. There's one of the Coppola daughters like sneaking around in part 1. I don't know. It's like, it's great. It's a great series, but like Natalie Portman is just the one that you're always like looking right at, like your eyes are swept right to her. And you're seeing in this movie that she's like, boom, she's like real, she's like beautiful. Her dresses are extravagant. The costume design, let's hear it for the costume design of Star Wars, bro. That is one of the best things about it, the production design, how the Millennium Falcon is designed inside to be, and how the different the metal ship that they have flying around is designed to be this real pointy ship. And then I thought those things they used to fly around where Boba Fett's chasing him, or Jango Fett's chasing him and throwing bombs. Well, you got to remember the scene in Empire Strikes Back where they go into a cave, and then they're kind of stuck in this cave, and the cave's kind of rattling, and so Han Solo goes to check it out, and Princess Leia like shoots her phaser, and like suddenly they realize the tunnel's moving, and then they realize they're way down in the belly of a serpent, like a giant space serpent, reached out and swallowed them. And we'd seen that. Now we know they're in the stomach, and It's like dry ice coming from the floor, and they shoot it, and the whole thing shakes. It's brilliant, bro. Because they're in the belly of the well, dude. This is the mythology. If you can get enough mythology. And I swear this goes back to my Hollywood built the Bible theory, because I swear after Star Wars came out, the Bible had to be readmitted to like saying everything Star Wars did instead of, like, it wasn't the Bible that he got it from. It was the Bible got it from Star Wars, bro, and revised the version. You think I'm wrong, but I'm actually not talking shit about the whole thing. But the Bible pretty much, when Harry Potter came out, the Bible changed too. And the Bible always changes according to who's reading the interpretation that they want it to mean. And so I think Hollywood actually invented the Bible. How do you like me now? There was no Bible before Hollywood. Good, we're on the same page. Anyway, so they're in this giant eel and they get out. One thing that's crazy about episode 5, Return of the Jedi, is it starts off on this ice planet of Hoth. This is, again, Irvin Kershner, and there's all these battles with these giant AT-AT walkers that are in these super big walking ships. And, after they blow the Death Star in episode 4, and I get the plans that are found in Rogue One. Rogue One, where are you? Yes, they get the plans in Rogue One right before they go in and to episode 4 and show the plans and show how they're going to destroy the Death Star. They do this again in Return of the Jedi when this guy who's like a fish person kind of tells the crew that they got the battle plans. And I wonder if they'll ever do that movie, one where they show the battle plans getting captured for the Return of the Jedi, not just A New Hope, where they captured how to destroy the Death Star. And that Luke Skywalker hit it perfect. It hit it perfect with his 2 laser beams, laser bombs, and blew up the Death Star. That's a hard shot, dude. I wouldn't take that shot unless I was real certain I was going to get it. And even if it seemed like I missed it the first time, I would take it one more time. But really, it was parsecs away from not working, and Luke got the lucky shot and got it in there. Whew, I don't know if I could do that. That'd be pretty intense. I don't know if I could do that. But we move on, and we realize that Rogue One is where they got the plans to do that. Another thing I'll mention is that Empire Strikes Back has the snow sequence, which has something about freezing to death, has something about Luke getting mauled by a Yeti, and then he gets knocked over and put in the cave, and then he barely beats the Yeti. And then Han Solo has to cut open his walker, like it's this giant, it's like not a giraffe, what is it, a kangaroo kind of? It's this alien kangaroo thing that you can take out in the snow. He has to kill it and shove Luke into the meat so he'll keep warm and take him home. Now, I remember when they first showed that when I was a kid, those were way different versions than they have now. There's 66 versions. I say there's hundreds of versions, because there's versions of these films before the re-release of this complete saga, which came out in 1999, 1996, and 97, and 98, 99, with Star Wars A New Hope being re-released. So those would come out before Episode 1 came out, are totally different versions than when they finally came out on disc. And I'm not just trying to say that to rile you as a Star Wars buff or whatever. It's not to say you have to see all the different versions to prove there are some, but just to know the storyline of the canonized American copy is good enough. But to know that there's similarities and differences between all the different cuts, including the original VHS versions that came out, including the original theatric versions that were released in 77, 80, and 83, with Return of the Jedi coming out in 83. That the Dagobah system is in Empire Strikes Back, and that the Dagobah system has swampland that shows Yoda, and Yoda's pretty old, but Yoda was old already. Yoda got mashed up in that battle against the Emperor. He hadn't seen him for 30 years now. He's still pretty bad about being a cantankerous but yet loving friend. And he teaches him the Force, and Yoda's kind of mad in Empire Strikes Back. He doesn't want him to go back and save his friends, which they'd have all died under Lando Calrissian's betrayal to Darth Vader, and they're all getting their asses kicked at Cloud City. And I think I'm bringing up all these mythologies because we got to look at the other mythologies of Episode 3
when the Trade Federation and Jedi's all get wound down, then Anakin takes out all the younglings. When Anakin takes out all the younglings, he kills them all with a lightsaber. And they're already killing all the Jedi. And Obi-Wan lives. He's on this giant like animal, and it jumps from cliff to cliff, and he's fighting, Darth Sidious. And Darth Sidious has 6 lightsabers, 3 arms with 6 lightsabers. And Obi-Wan definitely wins that match. Whether Yoda won it with the Emperor, I don't know. But Obi-Wan definitely won that match with Darth Sidious. Do we not agree? We agree, right? He beat part. We don't have to talk about how they're twirling swords when he's fighting. I mean, he cuts them off, cuts them off, cuts them off. I'm not going to tell you how he does it, but he whoops ass on Plagius. I'm sorry, Obi-Wan nails it, bro. And then later in episode 3, when Obi-Wan and Anakin are having the battle because Obi-Wan's snuck aboard the ship with Amidala to go meet him, and that she gets killed by Anakin because he grabs her. That's spoiler alert. They're fighting, and here's another one. They're fighting with their lightsabers, and this whole scene's going on where they're riding on this little piece of metal down a lava river, and they're fighting. And as soon as you hear the words, "Don't jump, Anakin, I've got the higher ground, I've got you beat," or whatever, he's like, "I've got the high ground." So he takes the high ground, and now you got him slashed with his arms and legs off, and he's a guy with arms and no legs. And he's sitting there burning. And for some reason, Obi-Wan thinks that's a sign that he's dead, but apparently his corpse gets hooked up to the wiry robotic parts of Darth Vader, and that's how he becomes Darth Vader. So that they finally kill Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi is interesting because Luke does it, the one who grows up, that's in Star Wars Episode 4, the guy that's got put into the animal, went to Dagobah. Ultimately, there's one other thing, Cloud City, and there Luke meets his match with Darth, and he knocks him down. But he meets Darth again in Return of the Jedi and swears that when they finally battle, he won't turn against his Jedi teachings, and that he almost does, but he actually turns Darth enough interested in saving us all and blowing up the ship and blowing up the Emperor. Luke's getting electrocuted to death. Darth Vader intervenes and it's the only good act that Darth Vader has done in all the movies, and it totally is the turning point of the whole series, because you're like, Darth just did something good, he saved the day, and now he's dead. But that it was Darth and not Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker that are one and the same, in that he gets the name Darth after he kills, right about the time he's killing the younglings and killing the Trade Federation, and he slices everybody down. The Wookiees get pretty shot up by the clones, and the whole thing is a mythology for like this grand scheme of how the Force works anyway. And if you notice in every pivotal moment of these movies, the Force is being used, and that means there's a lot of pivotal movements. I mean, if we're going to have a smoking or drinking game, use one or the other every time they use the Force, man. I'm not saying these are college parties we encourage, but these are college parties we encourage. So get to it. Get out and watch your set. That we will say more about 7, 8, and 9 at a later date. We've come to about the end of an hour, and I don't want to keep you anymore. That was a fun masterclass, but we got Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. And I've seen them all. Force Awakens is really like mellow at first. It's like they're all coming to this planet looking like really super duper, and it's kind of like a Tatooine, but even bigger. And everything about The Force Awakens is like Episode 4, but the bigger version, that there's 10 Death Stars now, and that there's all these ships in the sky, and that there's aliens everywhere, and everybody's nice to each other in some ways, but then there's still the ultimate evils and everything. And then like The Last Jedi's the weird one, because what I didn't get about Last Jedi was that, like in Force Awakens, they go from low to kicking everybody's ass. They're just like low characters, low scene, no real point, and then they're kicking everybody's ass, and that's cool. I like how they all get the American dream in that one. Beat down everybody. It's oppressive, just coming from this band of outcasts. And then you get The Last Jedi, and everybody's dying. That they're blowing up this big ship is one thing. It's a dreadnought. We got to blow it up. It's one of the biggest ships ever. But that we lost a bunch of dudes, and that the ships are floating around, and that they're constantly being driven backwards and oppressed and out of gas and can't go anywhere. It's like the Jedi's really got screwed in The Last Jedi. I mean, to the point of it was The Empire Strikes Back. Everything's blowing up and everything's going wrong. It's not just getting caught in a tractor beam twice in some other version of Episode 4, you know. And these movies, The Last Jedi, yeah, I mean, well, that's the one where it's like everybody's getting pounded so hard that Luke finally at the end shows up by meditating himself into the scene. And by meditating himself into the scene, he tricks everybody into shooting at him and fighting him, when really he's like an avatar of himself. He's like having an out-of-body experience and tricking them all into thinking he's there. And that's the one move that blows everything up more than the dreadnought getting blown up. Everything goes in the right order after that. They escape, they hide out, the enemy can't catch them anymore. But it seems like the enemy's a lot bigger than them in The Last Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker, I cannot speak too much about. I've seen it. Every time I watch these movies, I watch them, all 9 of them at once. And the last time I did that was May the 4th last year. And it was really good to watch them all in order, but I got really tired because I was trying to watch them all in like a day and a half, and like it was a bad idea because I watched them one after the other with a few hour breaks in between. And I'm telling you, I shouldn't have taken those breaks, because right when I got to The Rise of the Skywalker, which I saw in theaters too, but or saw on my Kindle too, and it was all 3D, you know. And then Rise of Skywalker, I mean, it's got everything from like strange Muppet costumes to why we look like we're in a sitcom on the ship like Star Trek or something. No, it wasn't like that, but I liked Rise of Force Awakens, or I liked Rise of Skywalker. That I didn't really get it. I didn't really know what was going on. I know the Emperor's like basically bugging on for most of that movie. But rather than describe how chip choppy it was from different event to event, let me just say that these new 3 are worthy of the other editions. And it's J.J. Abrams, Ryan Johnson, and J.J. Abrams, and these guys are good too. And I actually like some of theirs better than Marquand and Kirshner, although Marquand and Kirshner are beautiful. That 1, 2, 3, and 4 are probably the superior ones, not just because George Lucas was the one that designed the Empire, designed all the production design, and what the planets are, and he designed the galaxy of Star Wars. So you got to admit those movies have a more organized design policy of Star Wars, because they're the original scripts, and that he wrote the scripts for Empire Strikes Back and wrote the scripts for Return of the Jedi, I don't doubt. And that he wrote the stories for these is true too. These are worthy additions into the story. These movies are worthy, and they're Rise of Skywalker, even Lando being kind of a homebody and like microwaving some food or whatever he's doing. No, I'm kidding. It's cool, man. I'm cool with Star Wars. Star Wars is great. I love the fact that the Force exists just because this movie came out. That's the religion of the Star Wars, that there's a religious philosophy. But one thing I'd like to discuss about the Force before we go entirely is that there's a concept in Japan, again, called Mono no Aware, and samurais are aware of this, especially, and you kind of have to go through it to be a samurai. And it's where you realize you've come to this point where mortality seems real, part of nature, and acceptable, but still sorrowful. That death is longing over all of us, but that sometimes when someone dies, those longings are painful, and that pain puts you in kind of a quiet meditation of sadness, and that quiet meditation of sadness can often be the reflection we need to receive Mono no Aware. That's kind of like the Force, but instead of feeling sad, you feel as though you're absorbing the life form of the Force as it ebbs and flows depending on who joins it. So it's still kind of the same thing, because you can actually make a force field of reality in your own perception if you were meditating about Mono no Aware. And that's my secret, is I've seen Mono no Aware, and it's a lot like the Force, except one's sadness and one's like hyperkinesis, like available to move energy, to teleport, to telekinesis, to, telepathy. And I'm going to speak telepathy right now to you and say you all have a good night. We'll see you back in Masterclass May 3rd. That was a Star Wars episode. Sorry there wasn't any Star Wars music playing in the background. We were going to do that, but we definitely barely can afford to get a LucasArts logo on our Dungeon Master, so we're not going to push it too far. We thank George Lucas for making these movies, for being a badass, for leading USC in the last 50 years, leading USC in such a rising way. And we do appreciate all that. We appreciate USC, especially Dr. Casper, CalArts, Dr. Wagner. And at Harvard, we appreciate Dr. McCann. We say these are all great references of mine and great references of friends that are helping these classes commute and helping these classes generate and helping these classes go to different places and be shown. And that I know I seem tired, but if you listen to what I'm saying, there's actually really valuable things you can get from me explaining the story while I'm explaining the technique. And then I know I didn't really go into background positioning of matte painting in the first ones. I didn't really go around building these conceptual 3D realms. But these conceptual 3D realms means it's like a game engine. You have to have all the read-only memory in kind of this one shape, and then the random access memory kind of moves everything around and shows the moving of everything around. But again, in telepathy, I've just got to say, may the Force be with you. And I'm going to say it again in telepathy. May the Force be with you. Ready? Okay. Goodbye.